What's the cringiest thing you've seen a bride and groom do for their wedding? At a classmate's wedding. They were young, maybe like 22, 23. There is apparently a caking tradition in some parts of the country, where when they cut the wedding cake, the couple feed each other a bit and smear each other's faces with cake as a joke. The bride had absolutely made 1000% clear to the groom she did not want to be cake. He did it anyways, and not just a small smear, but full-on smushed the slice in her face. She was stunned initially, then got up, face full of cake, yelled, "You asshole, I told you not to do that," and then ran to a back area in the reception. The groom tried to follow, but the bridesmaid's mother of the bride stopped. "Hi monsieur," so he sat at the head table awkwardly while half the wedding party rushed off with the bride. She stayed back there for like an hour. They eventually did let him back there to check on her. We could hear her crying and them arguing. The rest of the reception came to a screeching halt until one of the bride's aunts emerged and directed the servers to clear the tables and put on some music. They got divorced 2 years later. This seems to be a fairly common predictor. If partners aren't on the same page about the cake thing, and the one who thinks it's funny disregards their new spouse's feelings on the matter, it's a bad sign for the longevity of the marriage. Happened at my niece's wedding. Her new husband full-on shoved that cake in her face and she lost it. Almost exactly what you described, except she never got over it. From that point forward for the rest of the night she was in tears, or screaming in rage. The wedding was literally ruined. A lot of people left when it became obvious that it had turned into a big shit show. I spent most of the reception outside smoking pot with various guests, young and old. So that was kind of fun. They're still married. The groom gave a speech thanking everyone for coming that devolved in the space of about 2 minutes into a straight-up roast of his new brother-in-law. They were friends, and the brother-in-law seemed to take it in good humor. But there's only so much implication of "I'm for sure going to be fucking your sister tonight" that you can take before it becomes really cringy. It didn't help that I barely knew anyone there because I was a +1, and B, I was on the table with the elderly relatives from that side of the family, who were less than amused. "I don't trust you, buddy." "Trust me, buddy. I'm fucking your daughter." Edit. By Anthony Jeselnik. Since a few have been asking, bride shows up almost 2 hours late to her own wedding. Southern California, in an open field, no water, no shade. She shows up and wants to get married in her yoga outfit. The groom shut it down, and when she refused to change her clothes, the groom decided to leave her looking stupid, and they never got married. Good call on the groom's part. At the reception line, after the church wedding ceremony, the bride had a large bottle of her favorite perfume and sprayed each guest with it, female and male, whether they wanted it or not, as they entered the banquet hall. Some guests complained that the smell of perfume was so strong that they lost their appetite and couldn't partake of the banquet. Why would she do this? The bride said she loved the fragrance and wanted to share that love with everyone celebrating with her and her new husband. Asterisk. "Hey hun, just wanted to share this great fragrance with you to celebrate my husband and I's special day. For a limited time, I'm offering you this unique opportunity to become an early distributor with me. Respond quick while there's still spaces. This great product won't be a secret for long. It's blowing up already. Easy to see why. The ingredients are so ethical and honest. It's practically made of honor." Asterisk. They sang their vows to each other. Neither had a singing voice. Vows were generally batshit crazy, like submissive in the bedroom, and not asking about where she was going. The auto-tune microphones were a terrible idea. Their vow songs shared a chorus and it was awful, and they expected the guests to sing along with the chorus. The vows singing lasted 20 minutes. Pure cringe. The groom sang his vows. I honestly had to stare at the floor in slow breath to not laugh and get through it. My cousin did this. He played the guitar while singing his vows. He doesn't know how to play the guitar or sing. Thank fuck there wasn't a guitar because I may have had a stroke. Invite all their Facebook friends and expect 700 people and like less than 100 show up. I knew a couple who didn't specifically invite anyone. Just made like a public event on FB or somehow assumed people would know when, where it was and show up. They were confused and offended when almost nobody came. Yikes. Whenever I see a Facebook public event, it doesn't make me feel obligated to come. Like it's a public block party or something. They bought an apple orchard after leaving the city to live a simpler life. And really doubled down on the apple theme. Apples everywhere. On the tables. In baskets all around the venue. On the podium where they got married. Pictures of apples hanging everywhere. Small fake trees with apples tossed under them. The dude marrying them had an apple tie on. Apples somehow incorporated into every dish for the reception. The cake was shaped like an apple. It was really fucking bizarre. They sold the orchard a couple years later because they had no idea what they were doing. I'm guessing no doctors attended the wedding. Literally standing outside the windows scratching the walls and hissing loudly. When I was reading the first few apple-themed things, I was like, ah, that's cute, but then the list kept going. LMAO. Not the groom and bride's fault, but the pastor marrying them. Talked about his marriage and his kids for 20 minutes. He was obviously going for something of showing what marriage will be like. But he full up was talking about how his daughter, Kelsey, learned to walk this way. And his other daughter's first words were this and that he and his wife make love throughout the house because that's what you do when in love, etc. Bride and groom had to stand there holding hands for 20 minutes right in front of him as the other 150 of us had to listen about his sex life and his kids. Oh God, you just reminded me of an acquaintance I knew. Didn't go to the wedding but heard from a mutual friend who was there, where the pastor marrying them told the couple to divorce their friends under the promise that it would make them a stronger couple or some shit like that. And they followed that advice. So pretty much after the wedding and reception, they just never again talked to any of the friends they had invited to celebrate their big moment. I thought they would be divorced within a year, but turns out that they're still together. But yeah, apparently married couples aren't allowed to have friends. That is probably the single worst piece of advice I've heard in this thread. When I was in high school, one of my hockey teammates had a kid with his girlfriend when they were juniors. They decided to get married and the wedding was officiated by my teammate's dad, who also happened to be our head coach. The entire wedding was the bride and groom's direct family and the hockey team were at a Golden Corral. Then the reception was at the same Golden Corral. Then we had a hockey game that night. The other team we played that night somehow found out about it and hounded the guy the whole time. They were a bunch of dicks. Now about 7 years later they have a second kid. Dad is an officer in the Air Force. Both of his kids play hockey and he coaches and refs, and him and his wife look very happy, so I'm glad it all worked out for the monsieur. Edit. For all of you asking about the game, I honestly don't remember if we won. Hockey season's a long one with a lot of games and it was 7 to 8 years ago. And as a side note, I really did not mean for this to be a rip on the couple. They're amazing together and doing an awesome job raising their kids in a loving household where they want for nothing. They haven't had the easiest lives, but they're doing the best they can and absolutely killing it. I haven't spoken to him in a while, but I've seen his dad, our old coach, at alumni games, and they're such an awesome family. They're the perfect example of the fact that you don't need a giant, expensive, fancy-ass wedding to be happy. As long as you have each other, family, and friends, it's a joyous occasion that should be celebrated. I know of no place in the world less suited for a wedding than a Golden Corral. This is the best story. I wasn't a guest. I was working the wedding. The bride got drunk and sat on some other dude's lap for 2 hours and flirted with him while the groom sat by himself at the head table with a defeated look on his face. This might be the most depressing one yet. Does dying on the inside count regarding the "until death do us part" clause? Not sure, but definitely sounds like grounds for an annulment. I've worked over 200 weddings at the same venue. Many couples wanted fireworks and we had a company that could always do a show. The couple always, without fail, would pick Firework by Katy Perry to play during the show. This makes me feel sick. Maybe you're not getting it. See, the song is called Firework, and they play it when there are literal fireworks going off. It's actually super clever and original. You just have to spend a few minutes thinking about it to get it. I had an 8th grade student die of cancer, and they played this at her funeral. That's all I can think about when I hear the song. The ceremony also was the name reveal. They changed their last name because they didn't want to be stuck to their heritage and didn't want anything to hold them back. Turns out they changed their name thinking they could erase their mountains of debt, or at least hide from it. Turns out you can't live under 2 legal identities. I've known a few couples who've changed their name to something distinct, i.e. neither partner's original last name, but they meant it as a symbol of their relationship, not a way of hiding from a credit rating. Oh, I have 2. 1. The bride decided to sing as she walked down the aisle. She was not a particularly talented singer, and she was singing over a Carrie Underwood song so we could all hear the original vocal track. She finished walking about halfway through the song and then stood there and sang the rest of the song at the groom, and all we could do was sit there and watch. 2. Different wedding. They began the wedding with the groom playing an out-of-tune guitar and singing to the bride. They were sitting on chairs in front of everyone, legit 400 people, and the bride was clearly uncomfortable, which made everyone else uncomfortable. That wedding also included a foot-washing ceremony, and when the bride put her shoes back on, she tripped on her dress and fell flat on her face. They hadn't done the vows yet, and the ceremony stopped for 20 minutes to deal with a nosebleed she gave herself. Bride takes 3 hours to appear. After the ceremony, she and her spouse go up in an air balloon. The marriage did not last a year. Well, aside from the 2 hours late part that could be cool. So one of the 3 hours counts as the normal lateness quota. Usually that hour is dedicated for after the ceremony for the wedding pictures, the time when everyone else is cocktailing it up before dinner. My cousin and his wife are super religious and maybe the 2 most awkward people I've ever met. They did one of those fake-out first dances where it starts with a slow song then transitions to a dance number with an upbeat song. Not only is that naturally cringe-worthy, the upbeat song was 5 minutes long and they just kept repeating the same moves over and over for what felt like eternity. There was no alcohol allowed at the wedding, so there was nothing to dull the pain. A wedding without alcohol! Exclamation mark. Lord save us. That reminds me of my cousin's wedding. The pastor made the ceremony into more of a Sunday sermon than a wedding ceremony. Then when they finally got to "I now pronounce you man and wife" instead of kissing the bride, groom, parents and 3 or 4 random people suddenly stood up, held hands on a circle and had a silent prayer for several minutes while everyone was confused about what was happening. Also, it was a dry reception. I saw one guy with a beer, but he must have brought it himself because I looked around and couldn't find any. Edit. I forgot to add that they did eventually kiss. They were turning to walk out to the reception and the pastor suddenly realized they never kissed, so he had them kiss. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.